The steam rising from the copper washbasin did nothing to warm the dread settling into Martha Brennan's chest, as she counted the coins in her worn leather pouch for the third time that morning, knowing that even if she counted 1,000 times more, the amount would never be enough to save her laundry business from complete ruin. The year was 1878, and Sweetwater, Texas had seen better days. Once a thriving stop along the cattle trails, the town had gradually lost its prominence as the railroad chose a route 20 miles north. What remained was a dusty collection of weathered buildings, stubborn residents, and Martha's struggling laundry service, which had been her sole means of survival since her father died 2 years prior, leaving her with nothing but debts and a rundown washhouse on the edge of town. Martha was 24 years old, though some days she felt ancient. Her hands, once soft and delicate, were now reddened and rough from the constant immersion in lye soap and scalding water. Her dark brown hair, which she kept pinned in a sensible bun, had begun showing premature threads of silver at her temples. Yet her green eyes still held a spark of determination that refused to be extinguished, even as everything around her crumbled. The problem was simple and insurmountable all at once. When her father was alive, the laundry had serviced the ranches, the hotel, the saloon, and most of the families in town. But after his death, the vultures had circled. First, the Matthews family had opened a competing laundry closer to the town center. Then the hotel changed ownership, and the new proprietor's wife insisted on doing the linens herself. The saloon girls started washing their own dresses. One by one, Martha's customers had drifted away, and now she was down to just 3 regular clients: elderly Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher Miss Pritchard, and the widow Callahan, none of whom generated enough business to pay the rent on the washhouse, let alone buy food and supplies. The rent was due in 5 days. Martha needed $30. She had $7.40. She sat down heavily on the wooden stool beside her largest washtub and allowed herself exactly 1 minute of despair. Her father had taught her that. When things got overwhelming, he would say, "You could have 1 minute to feel sorry for yourself, but after that minute was up, you had to stand up and figure out your next move." The minute passed. Martha stood up, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked around the washhouse. The building itself was solid enough. Her father had built it with his own hands. It had 4 large copper tubs, a massive cast iron stove for heating water, drying racks that lined the walls, and a separate pressing area with 2 heavy irons that she kept heated throughout the day. Everything was clean and organized, the wood floors scrubbed smooth, the windows letting in the bright Texas sunlight. It was a good business. It could be a good business again if only she could find customers. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. Martha smoothed her apron and called out, "Come in." The door opened, and a man stepped inside, ducking his head slightly to clear the frame. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who spent his days doing hard physical labor. He wore dusty denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a brown leather vest. His hat, which he removed as he entered, was sweat-stained and battered, but it was his face that caught Martha's attention. He was young, perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, and the most striking blue-gray eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of a winter sky, clear and direct. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a deep drawl that marked him as Texas-born. "Are you Miss Brennan, the laundress?" "I am," Martha said, trying not to sound too eager. "A new customer, even just one, would help. What can I do for you?" "Name is James Hartley," he said, turning his hat in his hands. I am the foreman out at the Double R Ranch about 8 miles west of here. We have got a bunkhouse full of cowboys who have not had their clothes properly washed in about 6 months, maybe longer. The smell is getting so bad even the horses are complaining. Despite her worries, Martha felt a smile tug at her lips. That does sound serious. It is, madam. We tried doing it ourselves, but between you and me, cowboys are not much good at laundry. Everything comes out either still dirty or falling apart, or somehow both at the same time. He met her eyes directly. I am looking for someone who can take on regular work. We have got 23 men at the ranch right now, and every one of them needs their clothes washed at least twice a month, probably more often during roundup season. I know it is a lot of work, but I am prepared to pay fair wages. Martha's heart began to pound. 23 men, twice a month. That was the kind of steady business that could save everything, but she forced herself to stay calm, to think practically. That is substantial work, Mr. Hartley. I would need to know more about the terms. How would the clothes get here? Would I need to arrange transportation? We would bring them to you every other week, James said. Bundle them up in the wagon, drop them off, and pick them up when they are done. As for payment, I am thinking $2 per man per month. That would be $46 a month regular. $2 per man per month. $46. Martha's mind raced through the calculations. That was more than enough to pay the rent, buy supplies, even set a little aside. It was salvation in the form of dirty shirts and dusty denim, but she had learned from her father never to accept the first offer without negotiation. The work you are describing is considerable, Mr. Hartley. Each man would have at least 3 or 4 changes of clothes, plus bedding, towels, any other items. I would be looking at washing, drying, and pressing for 23 men every 2 weeks. Given the volume and the quality of service I provide, I would need $2.50 per man. James studied her for a long moment, and Martha forced herself not to fidget under his gaze. She could not tell what he was thinking. His expression was unreadable, though something flickered in those blue-gray eyes, something that might have been approval. $2.50 per man, he repeated slowly. That would be $57.50 per month. For guaranteed quality work, Martha said firmly. Everything washed, dried, pressed, and mended if needed. Your men would get their clothes back cleaner than the day they were bought. A slow smile spread across James's face, transforming it completely. Where he had seemed serious and businesslike before, now he looked younger, almost boyish. Miss Brennan, you drive a hard bargain, but I accept your terms. $57.50 per month it is. Relief flooded through Martha so powerfully that her knees went weak. She steadied herself against the edge of the washtub. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. You will not regret this decision. I am sure I will not, he said, settling his hat back on his head. Now I was thinking we could bring the first load in this Saturday if that suits you. Give you the weekend to get started on it. Would that work? Saturday would be perfect, Martha said. Saturday was 3 days before the rent was due, but if she could show her landlord proof of steady income, he might grant her an extension. Good. I will have the boys load up the wagon Friday night, and we will bring everything over first thing Saturday morning. He moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. Miss Brennan, if you do not mind my asking, why has your business not been busier? The wash house looks well kept, and from what I have heard in town, your work is excellent. Martha hesitated. Pride wanted her to deflect the question, but honesty seemed more appropriate. My father ran this business before he passed. He had established relationships throughout the town. After he died, I tried to maintain them, but I am a woman alone, and some folks do not trust a woman to run a business as well as a man could. Others found alternatives that were more convenient. I have been struggling to keep the doors open." James's expression darkened slightly. "That is a damn shame, pardon my language. Far as I can tell, you seem plenty capable." "I am capable," Martha said quietly. "I just needed someone to give me a chance to prove it." "Well, you have got your chance now," James said. "Saturday morning. We will be here around 8 o'clock if that is not too early." 8 o'clock is perfect. I will be ready." He tipped his hat to her and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Martha stood in the middle of her wash-house, staring at the closed door, and then let out a laugh that was half-sob. She had done it. She had secured enough business to save herself from ruin. $46, no, $57.50 per month. It was more than enough. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a flurry of activity, taking stock of her supplies, making lists of what she would need to purchase, calculating how long it would take to wash, dry, and press clothes for 23 men. She would need to work efficiently, use all 4 wash tubs in rotation, keep the stove going constantly to heat water. It would be exhausting, but it was possible. That evening, after she had closed up the wash-house and returned to her small room above the general store, which she rented for next to nothing in exchange for doing the shopkeeper's laundry, Martha lay in bed and allowed herself to think about James Hartley. She had not had much time for thoughts of men in recent years. Survival had consumed all her energy, but there had been something about the cowboy foreman that lingered in her mind. The way he had looked at her directly, without the dismissive condescension she so often encountered. The way he had accepted her counteroffer without complaint. The genuine concern in his voice when he asked about her business struggles. She told herself firmly not to read too much into it. He was a customer, nothing more. She needed to focus on the work, on proving herself, on building her business back to stability. There was no room for foolish romantic notions. But as she drifted off to sleep, she could not help remembering the way his smile had transformed his entire face. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that made Texas almost seem forgiving. Martha was up before dawn, heating water, preparing her workspace, arranging the washtubs in the most efficient configuration. She had borrowed money from the general store shopkeeper, promising to repay him as soon as she received payment from the ranch, and had stocked up on soap, bluing, starch, and all the other supplies she would need. At precisely 8 o'clock, she heard the rattle of a wagon outside. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out into the morning sunshine. The wagon that pulled up in front of her wash-house was piled impossibly high with bundles of clothes, linens, and what appeared to be several sacks of miscellaneous items. James sat in the driver's seat, and beside him was another cowboy, younger and lankier, with red hair and a face full of freckles. "Morning, Miss Brennan," James called out, jumping down from the wagon with easy grace. "Hope you are ready for this." The boys were enthusiastic about the idea of clean clothes. Martha looked at the mountain of laundry and felt a momentary flutter of panic. It was even more than she had anticipated, but she pushed the feeling down and smiled. "I am ready. Let's start unloading." The young red-headed cowboy hopped down and introduced himself as Tommy Fletcher. Together, the 3 of them began carrying bundles into the wash-house. James and Tommy worked efficiently, stacking everything neatly where Martha directed. As they worked, more details emerged. "Fair warning," James said as he deposited a particularly grimy bundle on the floor. "Some of these have seen better days. A lot of the boys have been working cattle through mud and dust and worse. If something is beyond saving, just let me know." "I will do my best with everything," Martha assured him, "though I cannot work miracles." "You taking on this job is miracle enough," Tommy piped up, grinning. You should have heard the celebration in the bunkhouse when James told everyone he had found a laundress. Hank actually got teary-eyed. "Tommy," James said warningly, but there was amusement in his voice. "It is true," Tommy insisted. "We have been living like animals. This is going to make a real difference." When the wagon was finally empty, James pulled out a leather wallet and counted out $30 in bills. "This is half payment up front," he explained. "The other half when we pick up the clean laundry. Is 2 weeks enough time?" "2 weeks is perfect," Martha said, taking the money. It felt substantial in her hands, real and solid, proof that her fortunes were changing. "If you need more time, just send word to the ranch," James said. "We are in no rush." "I will have everything ready in 2 weeks," Martha promised. After they left, Martha stood surrounded by mounds of dirty laundry and felt a surge of pure determination. This was her chance. She would not waste it. She worked from dawn until well after dark every day for the next 2 weeks. Her routine became mechanical. Sort the clothes by color and fabric type, fill the washtubs with heated water and soap, scrub each piece thoroughly, rinse, wring out, hang to dry, press with the heated irons, fold and stack. Her hands grew even more raw, her back ached constantly, and she fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. But slowly, steadily, the mountain of dirty clothes transformed into neat stacks of clean, pressed garments. Martha took pride in her work, mending tears, replacing missing buttons, treating stubborn stains with a combination of techniques her father had taught her. These cowboys would get their clothes back in better condition than they had sent them. On the 13th day, a complication arose. Martha was nearly finished, had only a few more items to press, when she heard shouting outside. She set down her iron and went to the door. A well-dressed man in a fine suit and bowler hat stood outside, flanked by 2 rough-looking men who were clearly hired muscle. Martha recognized the man in the suit immediately. Silas Crenshaw, her landlord. "Miss Brennan," Crenshaw said coldly. "The rent was due 3 days ago. I have come to collect or to evict you from the premises." Martha's stomach dropped. In her focus on the laundry work, she had completely lost track of time. She had meant to speak to Crenshaw to explain about the new contract, to ask for just a few more days. But she had been so consumed with work that it had slipped her mind entirely. "Mr. Crenshaw," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I apologize for the delay. I have secured a substantial new contract. I will be able to pay you in full with late fees in just 2 days when my client returns." 2 days, Crenshaw repeated skeptically. "That is what you said last month and the month before. I am tired of excuses, Miss Brennan. I have been patient long enough." "This is different," Martha insisted. "I have a contract with the Double R Ranch, 23 cowboys, regular monthly business. I have the work right here." She gestured back toward the wash house, where the stacks of clean laundry were visible. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. "The Double R, that is the Rollins spread. James Hartley is their foreman." "Yes, exactly. Mr. Hartley hired me 2 weeks ago. He is returning tomorrow to collect the laundry and pay the balance owed." For a moment, Crenshaw seemed to waver. Then his expression hardened again. "Even if that is true, it does not change the fact that you owe me $30 for this month's rent, plus you are still behind $15 from previous months. That is $45 total, Miss Brennan. Can you pay that amount tomorrow?" Martha did her calculations quickly. James would pay her $27.50 when he picked up the laundry, the other half of the agreed price. Combined with what she had left from the upfront payment after buying supplies, she would have about $32. Not enough. "I can pay $32 tomorrow," she said. "And I can pay the remaining balance at the end of the month when the next payment comes in. Please, Mr. Crenshaw, I'm not asking for charity, just a little more time. The business is finally turning around." Crenshaw shook his head. "I have heard enough promises, Miss Brennan. You have until noon tomorrow to vacate the premises. If you are not out by then, my men will remove you and everything in this building." "But the laundry," Martha protested, panic rising in her voice. "I have to be here when Mr. Hartley returns. If I am not here, if he cannot find me, the whole arrangement falls apart." "Then you should have paid your rent on time," Crenshaw said coldly. He turned to his men. "Make sure she understands. Noon tomorrow, not a minute later." They left, and Martha stood frozen in the doorway. Everything she had worked for was falling apart again. Even with the new contract, even with steady work, she could not overcome the debts her father had left behind. She would be evicted, would lose the wash house, and James would arrive tomorrow to find her gone. He would think she had taken his money and disappeared. She would lose the contract before it even really began. That evening, Martha sat in the wash house long after the sun had set, trying to think of solutions. She could try to borrow money, but she had already exhausted every possible source. She could try to find a cheaper location, but there was nowhere else in town suitable for a laundry business, and besides, James was expecting to find her here. She could try to explain the situation to James when he arrived, but what could he do? He had already paid her half up front. She could not ask him for more money before delivering the work. She was trapped, and she could see no way out. She must have dozed off sitting on the stool, because she jerked awake to find sunlight streaming through the windows. Her back screamed in protest as she straightened. For a moment, she could not remember why she felt such a sense of dread, and then it all came flooding back. Noon. She had until noon to leave. Martha stood up stiffly and looked around the wash house. At least she could finish the last of the pressing. At least James would get what he paid for, even if she could not be here to deliver it personally. She would leave a note explaining where he could find her, though she had no idea where that would be yet. She had just finished pressing the last shirt when she heard the sound of multiple horses outside. Confused, she went to the door and looked out. What she saw made her jaw drop. James sat on his horse at the head of a group of at least 15 cowboys, all mounted, all looking toward her wash house. It looked like something out of a storybook, this small cavalry of working men. James dismounted and walked toward her, his expression concerned. "Miss Brennan, Tommy and I were planning to come collect the laundry this morning, but then some of the other boys insisted on coming along. Said they wanted to see the miracle worker who was going to make them presentable again. Hope you do not mind the crowd." "I do not mind," Martha said faintly. Then, because she could not hold it in any longer, the entire story came tumbling out. She told him about Crenshaw, about the rent, about the eviction notice, about having until noon to leave. The words came faster and faster, edged with desperation. "I have your laundry finished. Everything is clean and pressed and ready. You can take it now. But I do not know where I will be after noon today, so if you need to find me for future work, I will have to send word somehow." James listened to all of this without interrupting, his expression growing darker by the moment. When she finally fell silent, he turned to the assembled cowboys and said something too quiet for Martha to hear. Several of them nodded and dismounted. "Miss Brennan," James said, turning back to her. "How much do you owe?" $45 total, Martha said miserably. "I can pay 32 from what I have saved, but I am $13 short." James reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He counted out bills and held them out to her. "Here is $60. Pay your landlord the 45 you owe him, and use the extra 15 to get caught up on supplies or whatever else you need." Martha stared at the money, not taking it. "Mr. Hartley, I cannot accept that. It is too much. I have not earned it." You have earned it and more, James said firmly. You have been working yourself half to death for 2 weeks straight to make sure our clothes were cleaned properly. That is worth something. Besides, this is not charity. Call it an advance on future work. The boys and I have been talking, and we figure we will probably need laundry done more often than every 2 weeks once roundup season starts. Every week, most likely. So consider this an advance payment on next month's work. I cannot, Martha whispered, even though she desperately wanted to. It is not right. One of the other cowboys, an older man with graying hair and a weathered face, stepped forward. Begging your pardon, miss, but let me tell you something. I have been working ranches for 30 years, and I have never had a foreman as fair and decent as James Hartley. If he says you have earned this money, then you have earned it. Take it, pay your debts, and keep this business running. Because I will tell you true, I have not felt this excited about anything in a long time as I am about getting clean clothes. Several other cowboys called out in agreement. Martha looked around at all these men, these strangers who had ridden into town for no reason other than to support their foreman's decision to help her. Her eyes burned with tears that she refused to let fall. "Thank you," she said quietly, taking the money from James. "I will pay you back. Every cent of the advance, I promise." "I know you will," James said. "Now, what time does this landlord of yours usually show up?" He said noon. James glanced at the sun, calculating. "That gives us about 2 hours. Tommy, you and Charlie start loading the laundry into the wagon. Miss Brennan, you might want to gather up any personal items you have here, just in case. The rest of you, spread out and make yourselves comfortable. We are going to wait right here and make sure everything goes smoothly when Crenshaw arrives." The next 2 hours passed in a strange blur. The cowboys helped load all the clean laundry into the wagon with surprising gentleness, handling the pressed clothes with care. Tommy kept up a steady stream of cheerful chatter, pointing out his own shirts and exclaiming over how clean they were. Several of the other cowboys struck up conversations with Martha, introducing themselves, thanking her for her work, asking about her father and the business. Through it all, Martha was acutely aware of James. He did not say much, but he had positioned himself near the door of the wash house, clearly standing guard. There was something protective in his stance, something that made Martha feel safer than she had felt in a long time. At precisely noon, Silas Crenshaw arrived with his 2 hired men. He pulled up short when he saw the crowd of cowboys, his expression flickering between surprise and calculation. "Miss Brennan," he said, his tone noticeably less aggressive than it had been the day before. "I see you have company." "Mr. Crenshaw," Martha said, walking forward with the $60 in her hand. She counted out $45 and held it out to him. "Here is the rent I owe you current month plus back payments. We are square now." Crenshaw took the money, counted it carefully, and tucked it into his coat pocket. "Yes, well, very good, Miss Brennan. I am glad you were able to come up with the funds." "No thanks to your patience," James said quietly, stepping forward. "Seems to me a landlord worth his salt would have been willing to work with a tenant who was clearly trying her best, especially when that tenant had just secured a major new contract." Crenshaw's eyes narrowed. "My business arrangements are my own affair, Mr. Hartley." "True enough," James agreed. "Just like it is my affair who I choose to do business with in this town, and I will tell you straight, I do not much care for men who kick folks when they are down. From now on, if Miss Brennan has any trouble with rent or anything else related to this property, you let me know directly. The Double R Ranch stands behind her business." The implication was clear. Crenshaw might own the building, but he could not afford to alienate the biggest ranch in the area. His expression soured, but he nodded curtly. "As long as the rent is paid on time, there will be no trouble. "It will be," Martha said firmly. "You have my word." Crenshaw left, and Martha felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. She turned to James and the assembled cowboys. "I do not know how to thank you all," she said. "You did not have to do any of this." "Sure we did," Tommy said cheerfully. "You are our laundress now. We take care of our own." The other cowboys nodded and murmured agreement. Martha felt warmth spread through her chest, something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Over the next several weeks, a new routine established itself. Every week, James and a rotating crew of cowboys brought laundry to Martha's washhouse. She worked tirelessly to keep up with the demand, but it was good work, satisfying work. More importantly, it was work that paid well and on time. But something else was developing alongside the business relationship, something Martha tried repeatedly to ignore and found herself increasingly unable to. James took to stopping by the washhouse, even when there was no laundry to deliver or collect. He would bring news from the ranch, or a sack of apples from a tree on the property, or sometimes just conversation. He asked about her father, about how she had learned the laundry business, about her life before. In turn, Martha learned that James had come to Texas from Missouri after his parents died in a cholera outbreak, that he had worked his way up from a simple ranch hand to foreman through sheer hard work and natural leadership, that he was 28 years old and had been alone for most of his adult life. They talked about books they had read, though neither had much time for reading anymore. They talked about the town, about the changes they had seen, about their hopes for the future. The conversations came easily, naturally, without the awkwardness Martha had always felt when trying to talk to men before. One afternoon in early summer, James arrived at the washhouse to find Martha struggling with a broken drying rack. The wood had finally given out after years of use, and the whole structure had collapsed, taking several loads of wet laundry down with it. "Let me help," James said immediately, rolling up his sleeves. Together, they salvaged the wet clothes and laid them across every available surface to dry. Then James examined the broken rack, his hands running over the splintered wood with the confidence of someone who knew carpentry. "This is beyond repair," he said finally. "The wood is too rotted, but I can build you a new one, better than this old thing actually, sturdier." "I cannot ask you to do that," Martha protested automatically. "You are not asking. I am offering." He looked at her with those clear blue-gray eyes, and Martha felt her resolve weakening. "Let me do this, Martha." It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his voice did something strange to her heartbeat. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you, James." He built the new drying rack over the course of a week, coming by in the evenings after his work at the ranch was done. Martha would continue with her own work while he measured and sawed and hammered, and they would talk as they worked. Sometimes the conversation was light and easy, full of laughter. Other times it drifted into deeper territory, hopes and fears and dreams they had never spoken aloud to anyone else. Martha found herself looking forward to these evenings with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She had not allowed herself to want anything beyond survival for so long that these new feelings seemed dangerous, like standing too close to a fire. But she could not seem to help it. James made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before, as though he looked at her and recognized not just a struggling businesswoman or a laundress, but Martha herself, the person beneath all the roles and responsibilities. The evening James finished the drying rack, he stepped back to admire his work. The new structure was indeed sturdier than the old one, built from good solid wood that would last for years. "It is perfect," Martha said, running her hand along the smooth wood. "You did beautiful work." "I am glad you like it," James said. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her. "Martha, I want to ask you something, but I do not want to make you uncomfortable or put you in an awkward position since we have a business arrangement." Martha's heart began to pound. "What is it?" "There is going to be a dance in town this Saturday night, the summer social. It happens every year. I was wondering if you might like to go with me." Martha stared at him, her mind suddenly blank. A dance. He was asking her to a dance, like a courtship. "I know you are probably busy," James continued, misreading her silence as rejection. "And I understand if you would rather not. I just thought it might be nice, and you work so hard all the time, you deserve an evening of enjoyment." "Yes," Martha said quickly, before her nerves could make her reconsider. "I would like that very much." The smile that spread across James's face was worth every moment of anxiety. "Good. That is real good. I will pick you up at 7 o'clock on Saturday if that suits you." 7 o'clock is perfect. After he left, Martha sat down on her stool and pressed her hands to her cheeks, feeling how hot they were. She was going to a dance with James Hartley. The realization made her giddy and terrified in equal measure. She had not been to a dance since before her father died. She had nothing appropriate to wear. The few dresses she owned were plain work dresses, practical and durable but hardly suitable for a social event. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. Then she remembered the trunk in the back of the wash house, the one that held her mother's things. Her mother had died when Martha was 12, but her father had kept her clothes, unable to part with them. Martha had not opened the trunk in years, but now she went to it and lifted the lid. The scent of lavender and old fabric rose up, bringing with it a flood of memories. There, near the bottom, was her mother's blue silk dress. It had been her best dress, saved for special occasions. Martha lifted it out carefully. The fabric was still intact, though it smelled of storage. With some washing and pressing, it would be beautiful again. She spent the next 2 days carefully cleaning and restoring the dress. The work was delicate, requiring more care than her usual laundry tasks, but Martha poured all her attention into it. She let out the seams slightly to accommodate her own figure, which was a bit fuller than her mother's had been. She mended a small tear in the hem. She pressed it until the silk shimmered like water. Saturday evening arrived far too quickly and not quickly enough. Martha dressed carefully, pinning up her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. She allowed a few tendrils to curl around her face. Looking at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked younger, softer, almost pretty. James arrived precisely at 7, driving a small buggy borrowed from the ranch. When Martha stepped out of the wash house, his eyes widened and he seemed momentarily speechless. "You look beautiful," he finally said, his voice rough. "Thank you," Martha said, feeling her cheeks flush. "You look very handsome yourself." He did. He wore clean black pants, a white shirt, and a black vest with his hair neatly combed back. He looked like a different person from the dusty cowboy who had first walked into her wash house, though his eyes were the same, that same clear blue-gray that saw right through her defenses. The dance was held in the town hall, which had been decorated with ribbons and lanterns. A small band played in the corner, fiddle and guitar and bass, creating lively music that filled the room. People milled around, talking and laughing, and couples moved across the dance floor in practice steps. James offered Martha his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his shirt. They made their way inside, and immediately several people turned to look. Martha saw surprise on many faces. She had been so focused on work and survival that she had become almost invisible in the town's social life. Seeing her now, dressed in silk and on the arm of the respected foreman of the Double R Ranch, clearly surprised people. "Would you like to dance?" James asked. Martha hesitated. "I am not sure I remember how. It has been a long time." "That makes two of us," James admitted, "but I figure we can muddle through together." He led her onto the dance floor, and when he placed his hand on her waist and took her other hand in his, Martha felt a shock of awareness run through her. They moved together tentatively at first, finding the rhythm, learning each other's movements. James was not a practiced dancer, but he was steady and sure, and Martha found herself relaxing into the dance, letting him guide her. "You are doing fine," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "So are you," Martha said, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something electric and undeniable. The noise and crowd seemed to fade away until it was just the two of them, moving together in perfect synchronization. They danced 3 dances in a row before taking a break to get punch. As they stood at the refreshment table, several people came over to greet them. Mrs. Henderson, one of Martha's first loyal customers, beamed at them and made knowing comments about what a handsome couple they made. Tommy and several other cowboys from the ranch appeared, greeting James with friendly ribbing and tipping their hats politely to Martha. The evening took on a magical quality. Martha could not remember the last time she had felt so light, so happy, so normal. For once, she was not the struggling businesswoman or the orphan daughter or the laundress working herself to exhaustion. She was just a woman at a dance with a man who made her heart race. As the evening drew toward its close, James led her outside for some air. They stood on the porch of the town hall, looking up at the stars that filled the Texas sky in glittering abundance. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," James said quietly. "I have not enjoyed an evening this much in longer than I can remember." "Neither have I," Martha admitted. "I had forgotten what it felt like to just enjoy myself." "You deserve more of that," James said, turning to face her. "You work too hard, Martha. You deserve moments of joy and lightness." "Work is necessary," Martha said. "I cannot afford to be frivolous." "There is a difference between being frivolous and allowing yourself to be happy," James said. He reached out and gently tucked one of the loose curls behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You deserve happiness." Martha's breath caught. They were standing very close now, close enough that she could see the darker ring around the edges of his irises, close enough to count the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. His hand was still against her cheek, warm and gentle. "James," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He seemed to understand anyway. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Martha did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was soft and careful, a question more than a demand. Martha's eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into the kiss, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, grew more certain, though it remained tender. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing harder, and Martha felt dizzy with the intensity of it. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," James admitted, his voice low and rough. "I have wanted you to," Martha said, surprising herself with her boldness. James smiled and kissed her again, quick and sweet this time. "I should get you home. It is getting late and you have work tomorrow." The drive back to the wash house was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with possibility. When they arrived, James helped Martha down from the buggy and walked her to her door. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not for business, for us." "Yes," Martha said without hesitation. "I would like that. Tomorrow after church, we could take a ride out to the creek. The wildflowers should be blooming." "That sounds lovely." He kissed her once more, soft and lingering, before climbing back into the buggy. Martha stood in the doorway and watched him drive away, her fingers pressed to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. The next months unfolded like a dream. James courted Martha properly, with all the attention and care of a man who knew what he wanted. They took rides together on Sunday afternoons, spreading a blanket by the creek and talking for hours. James brought her small gifts, a book of poetry he thought she might like, a set of hair combs carved from horn, a jar of honey from bees that hived near the ranch. Martha, in turn, made sure his clothes were always perfectly pressed, packed him lunches when she knew he had a long day ahead, and slowly let down the walls she had built around her heart. The Cowboys from the Double R became a fixture in Martha's life. They brought their laundry like clockwork, but they also brought their friendship. They told her stories from the ranch, made her laugh with their antics, and treated her with a respect and affection that made her feel like part of an extended family. But it was James who held her heart. James, who looked at her as though she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. James, who listened when she talked about her fears and dreams. James, who made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved more than mere survival. One evening in late autumn, James asked Martha to take a walk with him. They had finished dinner at the small restaurant in town, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. James seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. He kept adjusting his hat and clearing his throat. "Is everything all right?" Martha asked, concerned. "Everything is fine," James assured her. "Better than fine. I just have something I want to ask you, and I am not sure how to go about it." They had walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. James stopped walking and turned to face Martha, taking both her hands in his. "Martha Brennan," he said, his voice steady now, serious and intent. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are strong and clever and kind, and you make me want to be a better man. I know I am just a ranch foreman without much to offer except hard work and honest intentions, but I love you with everything I have. Will you marry me?" Martha's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, James, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, his arms wrapping around her and holding her close as though he would never let go. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "I will make you happy," James promised. "I swear it." "You already do," Martha said, cupping his face in her hands. "You already do." They were married in early December in the small church in Sweetwater. It was not a grand affair, but it was perfect. Mrs. Henderson and the widow Callahan helped Martha make her wedding dress, altering her mother's blue silk with lace and ribbon, until it was transformed into something both beautiful and meaningful. Tommy served as James's best man, and Miss Pritchard, the schoolteacher, stood up with Martha. All 23 cowboys from the Double R attended, along with what seemed like half the town. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the ranch. The bunkhouse had been cleaned from top to bottom, and tables were set up with food and drink. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing under the stars. Martha danced with James, with Tommy, with each of the cowboys who had become her friends. She felt surrounded by love and goodwill, by a community that had embraced her. When the party finally wound down, James led Martha to the foreman's house, a small but well-built cabin about 100 yards from the main ranch house. He had spent weeks fixing it up, painting and repairing, making it perfect for his new bride. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartley," he said, lifting her over the threshold. Martha looked around the cabin, taking in the polished wood floors, the stone fireplace, the simple but sturdy furniture. Through a doorway, she could see a bedroom with a large bed covered in a beautiful quilt. "It is perfect," she said. "James, it is absolutely perfect." He set her down gently and kissed her, and this time there was no holding back. The kisses grew heated, urgent, hands exploring, breath coming in gasps. They made their way to the bedroom, shedding clothes as they went, and came together with a passion that left them both trembling and overwhelmed. Afterward, lying in James's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Martha felt a peace she had never known. This was what happiness felt like. This was what home felt like. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," James murmured, his hand stroking her hair. "Forever, Martha. I promise you forever." The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Martha continued to run her laundry business, though now she had help. James hired a young woman from town, a widow named Sarah who needed work, to assist Martha with the washing and pressing. This allowed Martha to manage the business without working herself into exhaustion, and it gave Sarah a steady income to support her 2 young children. Martha and James settled into a comfortable domestic routine. Martha would work at the wash house during the day, and James would handle his responsibilities at the ranch. They would have dinner together each evening and then spend the evenings talking, reading, or simply enjoying each other's company. On Sundays, they would attend church and then spend the afternoon together, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends from the ranch or town. In the spring, Martha discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a combination of joy and terror. She had never thought much about having children, had been too focused on survival to imagine such a future. But now, with her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, she felt a fierce, protective love for the tiny life growing inside her. James was overjoyed. He became almost comically protective, insisting that Martha not lift anything heavy, that she rest more, that she eat enough. Martha tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Martha had to cut back on her hours at the wash house as she grew larger. Sarah took on more of the physical work, and James hired another young woman to help as well. The business continued to thrive, and Martha felt proud of what she had built, not just for herself, but for the other women she was now able to employ. In late October of 1879, Martha gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Martha's arms, all the pain was forgotten. She looked down at the red, wrinkled face of her son and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. "He is perfect," James said, his voice thick with emotion as he sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Martha's shoulders, staring down at their child. "You are perfect. I cannot believe he is ours." They named him Thomas James Hartley, after both Tommy, who had become one of James's closest friends, and his father. Little Thomas, as they called him, had his mother's green eyes and his father's strong features. From the start, he was a good baby, healthy and happy, and he was absolutely adored not just by his parents but by every cowboy on the Double R Ranch. The sight of hardened cowboys cooing over an infant became a common occurrence. Tommy was particularly smitten, declaring himself Little Thomas's honorary uncle and spending any free time he had helping to entertain the baby. The other cowboys took turns whittling toys, bringing small gifts, and generally making complete fools of themselves trying to make the baby smile. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Martha's business continued to expand. Word had spread about the quality of her work, and she began receiving requests from other ranches in the area. She carefully managed the growth, never taking on more work than she and her employees could handle well. The wash house became known as a place where women could find fair employment and good wages, and Martha took pride in providing opportunities for women who, like her, were trying to build lives for themselves. James, meanwhile, continued to excel as foreman of the Double R. His fair treatment of the men, his skill with cattle and horses, and his natural leadership made him invaluable to the ranch owner, Mr. Rawlins. When Rawlins began talking about retirement, he approached James with a proposal. He wanted James to buy into the ranch to become a partner. It would require a significant investment, but Rawlins was willing to provide generous terms. James and Martha discussed the opportunity late into the night. It would mean taking on debt, something that terrified Martha after her experiences following her father's death. But it would also mean security, a future they could build together. The ranch was profitable and well managed. It was an opportunity that might never come again. In the end, they decided to take the chance. They used their savings, took out a loan from the bank, and James became part owner of the Double R Ranch. The risk was considerable, but so was the potential reward. The next few years were busy and prosperous. The ranch thrived under James's partial ownership, and Martha's laundry business grew to the point where she was employing 6 women full-time. They moved from the foreman's cabin to a larger house on the ranch property, a beautiful 2-story structure with a wide porch and room for their growing family. In 1881, Martha gave birth to a daughter, whom they named Elizabeth Mee, after both their mothers. Elizabeth, with her father's blue-gray eyes and her mother's dark hair, was a spirited child who kept her parents and older brother constantly entertained. Thomas adored his little sister, though he sometimes complained about how loud she could be. In 1883, another son arrived, Robert Samuel, called Robbie. He was a quiet, thoughtful baby, quite different from his boisterous older siblings, but equally loved. The house was full of noise and life and joy. Martha would sometimes stop in the middle of her daily tasks and just listen to the sound of children laughing, James's deep voice telling a story, the everyday sounds of a happy home, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought back to that desperate woman counting coins in an empty wash house, convinced her life was over, and marveled at how much had changed. But life was not without its challenges. In the summer of 1884, a drought hit Texas hard. The prairie grasses turned brown and brittle, and water sources began to dry up. The cattle struggled, and the ranch faced serious difficulties. James worked long hours, trying to keep the herd healthy and find enough water and forage to see them through. Money became tight again, not desperately so, but enough to worry. Martha increased her own work hours, taking on additional contracts and working late into the evenings. They supported each other through the difficult season, their love and partnership tested but not broken. When the drought finally broke in the fall, with blessed rain that soaked the parched earth, they held each other on the porch and watched the water come down, both understanding that they could weather any storm as long as they faced it together. By 1886, the ranch had not only recovered but was more successful than ever. James's careful management during the drought had earned him a reputation throughout the region. Other ranchers sought his advice, and he was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association. He was respected and prosperous, a far cry from the orphaned Missouri boy who had arrived in Texas with nothing but determination. Martha's laundry business had become an institution in Sweetwater. She employed 12 women now, and the wash house had been expanded twice. She had even begun teaching some of the younger women bookkeeping and business management, sharing the knowledge her father had given her. Several of her former employees had gone on to start their own businesses, and Martha helped them however she could, providing advice, lending equipment, and spreading the word about their services. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their 3 children playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Tommy, who still visited regularly despite now having a ranch of his own to manage. James took Martha's hand. "Do you ever think about that first day I walked into your wash house?" he asked. "All the time," Martha admitted. "I was so desperate that day, so certain everything was ending." "And instead it was just beginning," James said. He squeezed her hand. "I knew, that first day. I took one look at you, all fierce and determined, trying so hard to be strong, and I knew you were going to change my life. I needed 23 cowboys worth of dirty laundry to save me," Martha said with a laugh. "And instead I got you. We saved each other," James said. "I was alone, Martha. I had men I worked with, people I knew, but I was alone. You gave me a family, you gave me a home, you gave me everything." Martha leaned her head against his shoulder. "We built it together, all of this." She gestured to the house, the land, the children playing in the fading light. "We built this life together." Thomas ran up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can you come play? Uncle Tommy says you can throw me higher than he can." James laughed. "Does he now?" "Well, we cannot let that challenge go unanswered." He stood up and kissed Martha's forehead. "Duty calls." Martha watched him walk into the yard, watched him scoop up their son and toss him into the air, catching him securely as Thomas shrieked with delight. Elizabeth ran over, demanding her turn, and Robbie toddled after her. James accommodated them all, his laughter mixing with theirs. Tommy caught Martha's eye and smiled, giving her a little salute. She smiled back, thinking about how this man and all the others from the bunkhouse had shown up that day, backing James's decision to help her, creating the foundation for everything that came after. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both small and large. The children grew. Thomas became a serious young man who shared his father's love for ranching. Elizabeth developed a keen business mind that reminded everyone of her mother, and Robbie showed an artistic talent that surprised them all. Martha and James supported each child's interests, encouraging them to pursue their own paths while providing guidance and love. Mr. Rollins eventually retired completely, selling his remaining share of the ranch to James and moving to San Antonio to live with his daughter. The Double R Ranch became entirely James and Martha's, a legacy they planned to pass down to their children. The laundry business evolved as well. As indoor plumbing and washing machines began to appear in wealthier homes, Martha adapted, offering services that focused on delicate items, special care, and commercial contracts with hotels and businesses. She had always been willing to change with the times, to find new opportunities rather than clinging to old methods. In 1895, Martha and James celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. Their children, now aged 16, 14, and 12, organized a surprise party with help from the ranch hands and people from town. The celebration was held in the barn, which had been decorated with flowers and ribbons. Nearly 100 people attended, testament to the respect and affection the Hartley family had earned over the years. As Martha danced with James, surrounded by friends and family, she thought about the impossible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a failing laundry business and a desperate woman to a thriving ranch and a full, rich life, it had not always been easy. There had been droughts and debts, illnesses and injuries, moments of fear and uncertainty. But through it all, they had had each other. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. "Everything," Martha said. "How far we have come, how lucky we are." "Luck had nothing to do with it," James said firmly. "You worked for this, Martha. Every bit of it. You were so strong, even when you thought you had nothing left to give. You saved yourself, and then you let me stand beside you while you built all of this." "We built it," Martha corrected. Together, together, James agreed, kissing her softly. Always together. As the evening wore on, stories were told and toasts were made. Tommy, who had brought his wife and 4 children, stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I have known James Hartley for nearly 20 years now," he said, his voice carrying across the barn. "I have worked with him, ridden with him, and learned from him. But the best thing James ever did, the thing that showed his true character, was recognizing quality when he saw it. He knew Martha was something special from the first moment he met her, and he was determined to help her succeed. That decision changed all our lives. Because Martha did not just build a business, she built a community. She gave opportunities to women who needed them. She showed us all what determination and hard work and kindness could accomplish. So here is to James and Martha Hartley. May their next 15 years be just as blessed as the first 15. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Martha felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. She looked around at all these people, many of whom had become dear friends, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later, after the party had wound down and they had said goodbye to the last guests, James and Martha walked slowly back to their house. The children had been taken to stay the night with friends, giving their parents a rare evening alone. Inside, James built a fire in the fireplace while Martha made tea. They settled together on the sofa, Martha curled against James's side, his arm around her shoulders. "You ever regret it?" Martha asked quietly. "Tying yourself to me when you did? You could have had an easier life." "Never," James said fiercely. "Not for a single moment. Martha, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would walk through fire for you. I would do anything for you." "You did," Martha said softly. "You showed up with the whole bunkhouse when I needed customers. You stood up to Crenshaw when he tried to evict me. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. And you gave me a home," James said. "A real home with love and laughter and purpose. You gave me a reason to work hard, a reason to dream. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Finally, Martha spoke again. "I used to be so afraid," she admitted. "After my father died, I was terrified all the time, afraid of failing, of losing everything, of ending up alone with nothing. But you took that fear away. You showed me that I did not have to face the world by myself. You were never alone," James said. "Even before I met you, you had strength and courage inside you. I just helped you remember it." "We helped each other remember," Martha said. She turned to look up at him, this man who had walked into her wash house on the worst day of her life and changed everything. His face was more lined now, his hair showing threads of gray at the temples, but his eyes were the same, that clear blue-gray that saw right through to her soul. "I love you, James Hartley, more than I can ever say." "I love you too," James said, kissing her deeply. "Forever, Martha. I promised you forever, and I meant it." The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of a life well lived. Thomas grew up and married a teacher from town, a bright young woman named Caroline who fit perfectly into the family. They took over the day-to-day management of the ranch, though James remained actively involved, offering guidance and support. Thomas and Caroline built a house on the ranch property, and soon Martha and James became grandparents to a lively little girl named Alice. Elizabeth, true to her nature, moved to Dallas after finishing school and started her own business, a company that manufactured and sold improved washing equipment. She wrote home regularly, telling her parents about her successes and challenges. Martha was fiercely proud of her daughter's independence and ambition, seeing in Elizabeth a reflection of her own determination. Robbie, the quiet, artistic one, surprised everyone by becoming a photographer. He set up a studio in Sweetwater, and quickly gained a reputation for his sensitive portraits and stunning landscape photographs. He captured the changing face of the American West, documenting both its beauty and its transformation. Martha eventually sold the laundry business to Sarah, her first employee, who had become like a sister to her over the years. Sarah ran the business with the same care and integrity Martha had instilled, and Martha felt good knowing it was in capable hands. This allowed Martha to focus on her grandchildren, her home, and the community work she had become involved in, helping to establish a school fund for children from families who could not afford tuition. James, now in his mid-50s, remained strong and vital, though he had handed over most of the physical ranch work to Thomas and the younger cowboys. He spent his days managing the business side of the ranch, breeding horses, and mentoring young men who wanted to learn about ranching. He had become a respected elder statesman of the ranching community, known for his fairness and wisdom. One evening in the spring of 1902, Martha and James sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the prairie. They were both in their 60s now, their children grown and independent, their life's work largely accomplished. The moment had a quality of peaceful completion. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Martha asked. "You said the cowboys had not had their clothes properly washed in 6 months, and even the horses were complaining." James laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I was trying to make you smile. You looked so worried." "I was terrified," Martha admitted. "I was counting my last few dollars and trying to figure out how I was going to survive. And then you walked in like an answer to a prayer I had not even said out loud." "I needed a laundress," James said. "But when I saw you, I knew I needed more than that. I needed you. I just did not know it yet." "When did you know?" Martha asked curiously. "When did you realize you loved me?" James thought about it. "I think it was the day Crenshaw tried to evict you. I saw you standing there, so brave and proud, handing over that money even though I knew it hurt you to accept help. And I realized I would do anything to protect that spirit, that strength. I would move heaven and earth to make sure nothing ever broke you. That is when I knew." "And I knew when you built me the drying rack," Martha said softly. "When you spent all those evenings working with your hands to make my life easier, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. That was when I understood that you saw me, really saw me, not just as a business arrangement or a convenient wife, but as me." "I always saw you," James said. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "From the very first moment I saw you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Around them, the ranch was settling into evening quiet. In the distance, they could hear Tommy's grandchildren playing near the bunkhouse, the sound of their laughter carrying on the wind. "We built something good here," Martha said. "Something that will last." "We did," James agreed. "And it all started with dirty laundry and a desperate woman and a cowboy who brought the whole bunkhouse as customers." Martha laughed. "That should be the title of our story." "What story?" James asked. "Our love story," Martha said. "If someone were to write it down, that is what they should call it. The laundress was losing everything. The cowboy brought the whole bunkhouse as customers." "That is a terrible title," James said, grinning, "but accurate." They laughed together, the sound mixing with the evening breeze. As the sky darkened fully and the stars emerged in all their glory, James stood and offered his hand to Martha. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no music," Martha pointed out. "We do not need music. We never did." Martha took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They moved together on the porch, swaying gently to a rhythm only they could hear, the same way they had danced at that first social all those years ago. Except now, there was no awkwardness, no uncertainty. They knew each other's movements as well as their own, fit together perfectly after decades of practice. "I would do it all again," Martha whispered against James's chest. "Every struggle, every hardship, every moment of fear. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," James said, his arms tightening around her. "Every single moment." They danced until the night grew cool and Martha began to shiver slightly. Then James led her inside, to the warm house filled with memories and love, and they settled together in the life they had built. The years that followed were gentle ones. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new energy and joy. Martha and James watched their children's children grow, telling them stories of the old days, of how the ranch came to be, of the laundry business that started it all. They took walks together every evening, weather permitting, their steps slower now but no less purposeful. They read together by the fire, discussed the changing world, and marveled at how different things were from their youth. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family. The party was smaller than their 15th anniversary celebration, more intimate, but no less joyful. Thomas made a toast to his parents, speaking of their example of love and partnership, of how they had shown him what a good marriage looked like. Elizabeth traveled from Dallas with her husband and children, bringing gifts and laughter. Robbie presented them with a photograph he had taken of them just that morning, sitting together on the porch, their faces lined with age but their expressions content. Looking at that photograph, Martha saw their story written in their faces. The struggles and triumphs, the love and devotion, the life they had built together from nothing but determination and faith in each other. On a quiet evening in late autumn of 1910, Martha and James sat together in their bedroom. They were both in their late 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of long lives well lived. James had developed a persistent cough that worried Martha, though he insisted it was nothing serious. Martha's hands, so damaged by years of laundry work, ached in the cold weather, though she never complained. "Read to me," James said, settling back against the pillows. Martha picked up the book of poetry James had given her during their courtship, now worn and well-loved. She began to read, her voice soft in the lamplight. James closed his eyes, listening, a slight smile on his face. When she finished the poem, Martha looked over and found him sleeping peacefully. She set the book aside and lay down beside him, careful not to wake him. In sleep, he looked younger, the lines of worry and responsibility smoothed away. She studied his face, memorizing every detail as if she had not been looking at this face for over 30 years. "I love you," she whispered, though he could not hear her. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for loving me." As if sensing her words, James smiled in his sleep and reached out, his hand finding hers even in unconsciousness. Martha held on tight and closed her own eyes, feeling safe and loved and profoundly grateful. The seasons continued to change, as they always did. James's cough improved with the warmer weather, and they enjoyed a beautiful spring together, watching the wildflowers bloom across the prairie, just as they had on so many of their Sunday afternoon rides decades earlier. They took a trip to Dallas to visit Elizabeth, marveling at the modern city with its automobiles and electric lights. They held their newest great-grandchild, Thomas and Caroline's grandchild, a boy named James in honor of his great-grandfather. One evening in summer, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and red and purple. James had his arm around Martha's shoulders, and she leaned against him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "This is perfect," James said quietly. "This moment right here, this is everything I ever wanted." "It is perfect," Martha agreed, All of it has been perfect, hard sometimes, challenging often, but perfect in its own way. No regrets? James asked. Not a single one, Martha said firmly. You. Only that I did not walk into your wash house sooner, James said with a smile. I could have had more time with you. We have had 32 years, Martha said. That is more than many people get, and we have made every year count. Every day count, James corrected. Every moment. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared. The ranch was quiet around them, settling into evening. In the distance, they could hear their family, voices calling to each other, children laughing, the sounds of life continuing. Do you think they know? Martha asked. Our children, our grandchildren, do you think they understand how much we love them? They know, James assured her. How could they not? We have shown them every day, just like we have shown each other. Martha nodded, satisfied. She thought about the young woman she had been, counting coins with shaking hands, certain her world was ending. She thought about the tall cowboy who had walked through her door and offered her salvation without even knowing it. She thought about all the years between then and now, filled with work and love and family and joy. We did good, she said softly. Did we not? We took nothing and made it into something beautiful. We did, James agreed. We did real good, Martha, better than I ever dreamed possible. The stars continued to emerge, filling the sky with light. Martha and James sat together, surrounded by the life they had built, held in the embrace of a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. They had started with dirty laundry and desperate hope, and they had created a legacy of love and family and prosperity that would extend far beyond their own lives. As the years went on, they remained together, facing each day side by side. There were more grandchildren, more celebrations, more quiet evenings on the porch. Their love never diminished, never faded. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, more profound with each passing year. When people in Sweetwater told stories about the old days, about how the town had grown and changed, they always mentioned James and Martha Hartley. They told about the laundress who had nearly lost everything, and the cowboy who had brought the whole bunkhouse as customers, not knowing he was bringing himself to his future wife. They told about how a business arrangement had become a love story, how determination and faith had built a legacy. And Martha and James, sitting on their porch in the golden light of evening, holding hands the way they had for decades, knew that their story was not about business or money or success, though they had achieved all those things. Their story was about love. Simple, enduring, transformative love. The kind of love that sees someone at their lowest point and says, I will stand with you. The kind of love that builds a life together one day at a time. The kind of love that lasts into their twilight years. They remained devoted to each other. When James finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Martha held his hand and told him one more time that he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. And when Martha followed him 2 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her last words were a smile and a whisper. I am coming, James. Wait for me. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky as vast and blue as it had been on that spring day when a desperate laundress and a determined cowboy had first met. Their story became legend in Sweetwater, told and retold, embellished and remembered. But at its heart, it remained simple and true. It was a story about a woman who refused to give up, even when everything seemed lost. It was about a man who recognized strength and worth when he saw it. It was about dirty laundry and clean starts, about business arrangements that became love stories, about building something beautiful from nothing but hope and hard work. But most of all, it was a story about love. Real, honest, enduring love. The kind that changes everything. The kind that lasts forever. And in Sweetwater, Texas, as the years turned into decades and the decades into a new century, people would still point to the old wash house, now a historical landmark, and tell the story of Martha and James Hartley. They would smile and say, "That is where it all started. The laundress was losing everything. The cowboy brought the whole bunkhouse as customers, and they fell in love and lived happily ever after." Because that is exactly what they did.